My grandmother was dying when she told me the secret she had kept for 63 years. She was 82 years old, lying in a hospital bed that seemed to swallow her fragile body, and she grabbed my hand with a strength I didn't know she still possessed. What she whispered to me that night changed everything I thought I knew about my family, my history, and myself. And when I finally got the DNA results 3 weeks later, every single word she had spoken turned out to be true. But here's the thing about family secrets. They don't stay buried forever. They have a way of rising up from the depths, demanding to be heard, forcing you to confront truths you never knew existed. My grandmother knew that. She knew that if she didn't tell me before she died, the secret would die with her. And some secrets are too important to die. Let me take you back to the night everything changed. My name is Emma Richardson, and I grew up in a small town in rural Virginia called Millbrook. It's the kind of place where the same families have lived for generations, where everybody knows everybody, and where the past is never really past. My grandmother, Margaret Richardson, was born in that town in 1941. She lived there her entire life, never traveling more than 50 miles in any direction. She married my grandfather, William, when she was 19 years old. They had 3 children together, including my mother, Patricia. I thought I knew everything about my grandmother's life. She told stories all the time, about the Great Depression, about World War II, about the way things used to be before television and internet changed everything. I loved those stories. I would sit at her feet as a child, listening to her talk about the past, imagining myself there. But there was one story she never told. One chapter of her life that she kept hidden from everyone, including her own children. I discovered that story when I was 31 years old, and it shattered everything I believed about my family. It was a Tuesday night in March when I got the call. My grandmother had suffered a massive stroke. The doctor said she didn't have long, maybe a few days at most. I dropped everything and drove 4 hours through the night to get to the hospital in Virginia. When I walked into her room, I barely recognized her. She had always been so vibrant, so full of life. Even at 82, she had been sharp as a tack, making jokes and bossing everyone around. But the woman lying in that hospital bed was a shadow of herself. Her skin was pale and papery, her eyes sunken, her breathing shallow and labored. My mother and her siblings were there, gathered around the bed like mourners at a wake. We took turns holding her hand, talking to her, hoping she could hear us even though she hadn't opened her eyes in hours. Around midnight, something changed. My grandmother's eyes fluttered open, and she looked directly at me. Not at my mother, not at my aunts and uncles. At me. "Emma," she whispered, her voice so weak I had to lean in close to hear her. "I need to tell you something." My mother stepped forward. "Mama, you need to rest. Whatever it is can wait." But my grandmother shook her head, a small movement that seemed to cost her tremendous effort. "No," she said. "It can't wait. I've waited too long already." She asked to speak with me alone. My mother looked hurt, confused, but she respected her mother's wishes. One by one, my family members filed out of the room, casting curious glances over their shoulders. When we were alone, my grandmother squeezed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong, almost desperate. "What I'm about to tell you," she said, "I've never told anyone. Not your grandfather. Not your mother. No one." I nodded, my heart pounding. "I'm listening, Grandma." She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. When she opened them again, there were tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "When I was 18 years old," she began, "before I met your grandfather, I fell in love with a boy named James Harper." I didn't recognize the name. In all the stories my grandmother had told me over the years, I had never heard her mention anyone named James Harper. "He was the most beautiful person I had ever seen," she continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke, as if the act of finally telling this story was giving her energy. He had dark hair and green eyes, and when he smiled, it was like the sun coming out from behind the clouds. What happened to him? I asked. My grandmother's face darkened. His family was poor. They lived on the other side of town, in the area where the mill workers lived. My family was wealthy, comparatively. My father owned the general store, and he had very specific ideas about who I should marry. I could see where this was going. A forbidden love. A family that wouldn't approve. It was like something out of a novel. We met in secret, she said. For almost a year, we would sneak away to a clearing in the woods behind the old church. We thought we were being so clever, so careful. But in a town like Millbrook, nothing stays secret for long. She paused, and I could see the pain in her eyes, fresh and raw even after all these years. I got pregnant, she whispered. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. My grandmother had been pregnant before she married my grandfather. That meant there was someone out there, a child who would now be in their 60s, that I had never known about. What happened to the baby? I asked, my voice trembling. My grandmother began to cry, great heaving sobs that shook her entire frail body. A nurse poked her head in, concerned, but I waved her away. They took her from me, my grandmother said when she could speak again. My parents. They were ashamed, horrified that their daughter had gotten pregnant out of wedlock. Back then, it was the worst thing that could happen to a family's reputation. Her. I said. The baby was a girl. Yes. A beautiful little girl with dark hair and green eyes, just like her father. I named her Elizabeth, after my grandmother. I held her for exactly 3 hours before they came and took her away. I couldn't imagine it. I couldn't imagine the pain of having your child ripped from your arms and taken away forever. I reached out and touched my grandmother's cheek, wiping away her tears. Where did they take her? I asked. They sent her to a home for unwed mothers about 100 miles from here. A place where girls like me could have their babies in secret and give them up for adoption. I was supposed to forget she ever existed. I was supposed to go home and marry a respectable man and never speak of it again. And James? I asked. What happened to him? My grandmother's face contorted with grief. His family moved away shortly after I gave birth. I never saw him again. I heard years later that he was killed in Korea. He never knew about the baby. He never knew he had a daughter. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process everything she had told me. My grandmother had had a baby. A daughter. A half-sibling to my mother and her siblings. A great-aunt I had never known existed. Why are you telling me this now? I finally asked. Why me? Why not Mom? My grandmother looked at me with those watery blue eyes. Because your mother has spent her entire life trying to earn my approval. She put me on a pedestal, Emma. If she found out about this, it would destroy her image of me. But you've always seen me as I really am. Human. Flawed. Imperfect. She squeezed my hand again. I need you to find her, she said. My Elizabeth. I've wondered about her every single day for 63 years. I need to know that she's okay. I need to know that she had a good life. But Grandma, I said, how am I supposed to find her? It was so long ago. The records might not even exist anymore. There's something else, she said. After your grandfather died, I sent in one of those DNA tests. I wanted to know more about my ancestry. But I also I hoped that maybe Elizabeth had done the same thing. That maybe she was looking for me too. She told me the name of the service she had used, the login information for her account. I never had the courage to check the results, she admitted. I was too afraid of what I might find. But you can check. You can find her for me. I promised her I would. I promised I would find Elizabeth, wherever she was. My grandmother smiled at me then, a peaceful smile, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She died 2 days later, surrounded by her family, holding my mother's hand. She never told anyone else about Elizabeth. She never told my mother that she had a half-sister somewhere in the world. That burden, that responsibility, fell to me. The day after the funeral, I logged into my grandmother's DNA account. I wasn't prepared for what I found. There was a match. A close match. The website said it was consistent with a parent-child relationship. Elizabeth was still alive. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the screen, my hands shaking. My grandmother's daughter was out there. After 63 years, she was still out there, and she had taken a DNA test too. She was looking for her biological family. She was looking for my grandmother. The profile had a message feature. With trembling fingers, I typed out a message. My name is Emma Richardson. I believe you may be my grandmother's daughter. Her name was Margaret Richardson, and she was born in Millbrook, Virginia in 1941. She gave birth to a baby girl in 1959 and named her Elizabeth. She was forced to give the baby up for adoption, and she spent the rest of her life wondering what happened to her. She passed away 3 days ago, but before she died, she asked me to find you. If you're willing, I would love to talk. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. The wait was agonizing. Every time my phone buzzed, I grabbed it, hoping it was a notification from the DNA website. Days passed. A week. I started to lose hope. Maybe Elizabeth didn't want to be found. Maybe she was angry at the mother who had given her up. Maybe she wanted nothing to do with us. And then, 10 days after I sent the message, I got a response. Emma. My name is Elizabeth Harper Williams. I have been searching for my biological family for over 40 years. I can't believe this is real. I can't believe I finally found you. Yes, I would very much like to talk. I called her that night. Elizabeth was 63 years old, living in Ohio with her husband of 38 years. She had 2 children and 4 grandchildren. She had been adopted by a loving family who had told her the truth about her origins from a young age. She had always known she was adopted, and she had always wondered about her biological parents. I spent decades searching, she told me, her voice breaking with emotion. But the records were sealed. Back then, they did everything they could to make sure adoptees couldn't find their birth families. I was about to give up hope when I took that DNA test. I never imagined. I never thought I would actually find anyone. I told her everything my grandmother had told me. About James Harper, the boy with green eyes who died in Korea. About the secret pregnancy and the forced adoption. About the 63 years of wondering and hoping and grieving. Elizabeth was crying by the time I finished. She never forgot me, she said. All this time, I was afraid she didn't want me. I was afraid she gave me up because she didn't love me. But she did. She loved me the whole time. More than you could ever know, I said. We talked for 3 hours that night. Elizabeth told me about her life, her adoptive parents, who had passed away years earlier, her husband and children. She was a retired schoolteacher who loved gardening and baking. She had my grandmother's laugh, I noticed. That same warm, musical sound that I had grown up hearing. A month later, Elizabeth flew to Virginia to meet me and my family. But here's where things got complicated. I still hadn't told my mother about Elizabeth. My grandmother had asked me not to, had been afraid of destroying the image my mother had of her. But now I was faced with an impossible choice. Elizabeth was coming. She was going to meet the family she never knew. And I couldn't keep her a secret forever. The night before Elizabeth arrived, I sat my mother down and told her everything. I had expected anger. I had expected hurt and betrayal and tears. And there were all of those things. But there was also something I hadn't expected: understanding. I always knew there was something Mama wasn't telling us, my mother said quietly. There was this sadness in her eyes sometimes, when she thought no one was watching. I never knew what it was, but I knew it was there. You're not angry at her? I asked. How can I be angry at her? She was 18 years old. She had no power, no choice. They took her baby away and told her to forget. How can I be angry at someone who suffered so much? My mother cried for a long time that night. She cried for the sister she never knew. She cried for the mother who carried this secret for over 6 decades. She cried for the baby who was torn away and the family that was broken before it ever had a chance to form. The next day, Elizabeth arrived. I will never forget the moment she walked through the arrivals gate at the airport. She was tall, with silver hair and green eyes, James Harper's eyes. She looked like my grandmother. She looked like my mother. She looked like family. My mother saw her first. She made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob, and then she was running. Running toward this stranger who was also her sister. They collided in the middle of the airport, 2 women who had never met, holding each other and crying. I'm Patricia, my mother managed to say through her tears. I'm your sister. I know, Elizabeth said. I know. The days that followed were some of the most beautiful and painful of my life. Elizabeth met her siblings, her nieces and nephews, her extended family. She visited the clearing in the woods where her parents had fallen in love. She visited the cemetery where her mother was buried and placed flowers on the grave. She told my grandmother's headstone that she forgave her. That she understood. That she had lived a good life and had been loved. That she was grateful to have finally found her way home. The DNA had confirmed every word of my grandmother's deathbed confession. Elizabeth was Margaret's daughter. James Harper was Elizabeth's father. The story that had been kept secret for 63 years was finally, fully, undeniably true. But the story didn't end there. Through Elizabeth, I learned more about James Harper. His family had moved away from Millbrook in 1959, shortly after my grandmother gave birth. They had settled in North Carolina, where James had eventually enlisted in the army. He was killed in action in Korea in 1952, at the age of 22. Elizabeth had found his family too. James had siblings who were still alive, now in their 80s. They had pictures of him, letters he had written home. Elizabeth showed me a photograph of her father, and I understood immediately why my grandmother had fallen in love with him. He was beautiful, with dark hair and those piercing green eyes. He had never known about Elizabeth. He had gone to war and died without ever knowing he had a daughter. But now, through DNA and determination and a deathbed confession, his daughter knew him. She knew his name, his face, his story. She knew that he had loved her mother, even if they were never allowed to be together. That's what DNA can do. It can reach across decades and miles and secrets and lies. It can find the truth when everything else has failed. It can reunite families that were torn apart and give closure to wounds that have been open for a lifetime. My grandmother never got to meet Elizabeth. She died 3 days before I sent that first message, never knowing if her daughter would be found. But I like to think she knows now. I like to think that somewhere, somehow, she's aware that her Elizabeth is okay. That she lived a good life. That she found her way home. Elizabeth is part of our family now. She comes to Thanksgiving and Christmas. Her children and grandchildren have been embraced by our extended clan. My mother and Elizabeth talk on the phone every week, making up for 63 years of lost time. It's not a perfect happy ending. There's grief here too, for the decades that were lost, for the mother and daughter who never got to reunite, for the father who died without ever knowing he had a child. But there's also hope. There's healing. There's the proof that it's never too late to find the truth, to find your family, to find yourself. If you're watching this and you've ever wondered about your own family history, if you've ever felt like there were secrets you didn't know or stories that were never told, I want to encourage you to ask questions. Talk to the older generations while you still can. They carry histories within them, stories that will be lost forever if they die unspoken. And if there's someone in your life who deserves your forgiveness, or someone you need to forgive, don't wait. My grandmother carried her secret for 63 years. She almost took it to the grave. Don't let the important things go unsaid. Don't let fear or shame or pride keep you from connecting with the people who matter. My grandmother taught me many things in her 82 years. She taught me to be kind, to be strong, to be resilient. But the greatest lesson she taught me came in her final hours, when she trusted me with her deepest secret. She taught me that love never dies. That a mother's love for her child can survive 63 years of separation, can survive secrecy and shame and societal pressure. That love will find a way, even when all hope seems lost. Elizabeth and I visit my grandmother's grave together now. We bring flowers and sit on the grass and tell her about our lives. We tell her that Elizabeth is happy. We tell her that the family she was forced to break apart has finally been put back together. I hope she can hear us. I hope she knows. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own family and the secrets that might be waiting to be discovered, I hope you'll share your thoughts. Drop a comment below about your own family stories, the ones that shaped you, the ones you discovered late, the ones that are still waiting to be told. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about DNA, family secrets, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us, make sure you're along for the journey. Because these stories matter. They remind us who we are and where we came from. Take care of your families. Listen to their stories. And never be afraid to search for the truth.